Okay, good evening everyone and welcome to this meeting of the Performance Management Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Mick Radley and I'm the Chairman. Members, please can I remind you that this meeting is being broadcast to the public via the Council's YouTube channel. As we move through the meeting, please can I remind everyone present to turn off their microphones when they're finished speaking. Members, before we proceed with the business of the meeting, please can I remind you that an additional report in respect of Agenda Item 5, Introduction to Terms of Reference and Work Programme 2022-23, was circulated to the committee on Monday the 16th of May 2022. This report was prepared by myself and includes further detail as to the reasons and justification behind the choice of scrutiny topic. I shall now proceed with the business of the meeting. Agenda item 1 is absence for apologies. Do we have any apologies for absence from members of the Performance Management Scrutiny Committee? I think we have 2 missing rather.
Chairman, I've just checked the governance inbox and we've got no further apologies for this evening.
No further apologies. Okay. Thank you. If there are no more apologies, I'll proceed to item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or non-pecuniary interest that they wish to declare this evening? Please state the item and the nature of your interest. No? Okay. If there are no declarations, I will proceed to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Can I please have a proposer to approve the minutes as an accurate record of the previous meeting of the Performance Management Scrutiny Committee on the 23rd of March 2022?
So moved, Chairman.
I second it.
You're seconding it. Thanks to Councillor Rayner. Thanks to Councillor Rose. All those in favour? That is 3, 4, 6 abstentions and 1 abstention. Yeah, sure, yeah. Thank you. So the minutes are approved and I will now do the initial and sign. Over. Fantastic. Okay. So the minutes are approved, so we'll move on to item 4, which is public question time. Members, I can confirm that there are no registered speakers for this evening's meeting. Members, we shall now proceed to item 5, scrutiny review into section 106, Open Spaces and NHS Expenditure, Introduction to the Terms of Reference and Work Programme for 2022-23. Members, this report marks the start of the committee's new scrutiny review into section 106, Open Spaces and NHS Expenditure, and is set out in pages 5 to 11 of the agenda. I'd now like to ask the Governance Officer, Jess, to introduce this report. Jess.
Thank you, Chairman. So just to give you a quick run through of the report, members. So this report outlines the terms of reference for the scrutiny review into section 106, Open Spaces and NHS Expenditure. Just to highlight that the terms of reference were circulated, there was another set of terms of reference circulated round to members last week. They have been published on the website alongside the agenda, but as a separate document, just so you're aware they are both there. So just to give you a bit of context as to how this topic came to light, So in January 2022, we had the call for topics process, whereby all members were invited to submit their topics for potential inclusion as part of the Scrutiny work programme for 2022-23. After all those topics were submitted, Management Board reviewed those and gave their feedback as to which topics they felt had the most merits and could potentially add the most value to the organisation if they were taken forward for scrutiny review. So one of the topics that was put forward was the Section 106 scrutiny topic, which was originally submitted by the Chairman, Councillor Radley. And then the chairman of the 4 scrutiny committees all met together to discuss the feedback that Management Board had given and were supported by governance officers during that time as well. So following the discussions with the chairman and based on all the feedback, it was agreed that the topic of Section 106, open spaces and NHS expenditure, would be allocated to the Performance Management Scrutiny Committee for the purposes of scrutiny review. So the idea behind was to establish a clearer understanding of the council's performance in this area and sort of the reasons behind any delays in implementing those funds. Alongside the scrutiny review, Councillor Mrs Frey is going to run a member reference group, but it's not intended that the work of the member reference group will duplicate the work that we do. It will be a separate piece of work running alongside, and then the member reference group will then provide a report to this committee at a later date. So that, in a nutshell, members, is just a quick summary of how we got to where we are with the Section 106 topic, how it's come to light as a scrutiny review. And I'd just like to pass it back on to Councillor Radley to explain things a bit further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Jess. I think the next thing, you may have some questions related to that, and I'll explain a little bit about my supplementary report first, and then perhaps we'll take questions on both those reports if you have any clarification before we talk about the next steps, if you like. I would like to draw your attention to the supplementary report that was mentioned at the start of the meeting that I've prepared. This report is for noting only and goes into further detail as to the reasons behind the choice of this topic, as well as some performance data and initial observations of myself. So the report, just to clarify to members that the Council has issued the last 2 years what's called an infrastructure spending statement. Okay, this document that is on the council website, and it's been a requirement the last 2 previous financial years, and for all district councils, I believe. But it's quite a good document. It goes into a lot of detail about what's been spent, etc. But one of the issues that I draw from that is that there is a total of in the region of £6 million that the council is holding in terms of funds that is unspent. And I felt that required a better level of understanding as to the reasons for that and indeed how it was made up. So part of my report, I've actually, if going to the second page of my report, you can see that I've done a little bit of work there in looking at the funds spent during the 2 years in question, 2019, 20 and 2021. And you can see that some circa £200,000 was spent in each of those 2 years of those funds received, and an average of something like an average of 22 contributions were cleared each year in terms of being spent. But those funds, a lot of those funds were received in up to 10 years prior to being spent. So the council has sort of had those funds for that period of time. And if you look at, certainly for that is for open spaces, if you look at the healthcare for NHS, in actual fact, of the fund, just to clarify, when there was a contribution for the NHS, that money comes to BDC for holding, and it's then for the NHS to request that money from BDC to spend according to the criteria in the agreement. But during those 2 years, no funds were requested from the funds being held from the NHS. So these are the sort of some of the criteria that I've drawn from the data. Also, if you have a look back at the £6 million being held at the 31st of March 2021, it splits out into three or four sections. The big part of that is around 3.3 million, which is for open spaces projects, and 204 different contributions that the council has received over the last 10 years that still remain unspent. There are sums of money, around £2 million that's been received as contributions towards community buildings. Now, those are usually a build-up of funds for a project, I think, in Halstead and in Witham, two particular projects involved there. For the NHS, something like £572,000 is currently being held, waiting for the NHS to request those funds. So this gives you a bit of a, I've also drawn a few headline observations as well, which I'm sure you can read. But really, in essence, this gives us a better understanding, I believe, going forward of where we're at and where the focus needs to be in terms of any scrutiny going forward. So that's my comments on that report. So at this point, before we talk about potentially next steps or where we want to take this, I'd just like to give members the opportunity to ask any questions of Jess regarding the terms of reference in the original report, or indeed the report that I've sent. Yeah, Councillor Rose.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Very good report. I've read that. There's a lot of information in there. I don't think your committee tonight is somewhere where I would launch into the NHS healthcare provision. That would be perhaps a separate meeting. It may well be that it needs to come to full council. However, together with Councillor Tattersley and I believe one or two directors over the years, we've attended Witham Town Council Health Fund meetings, or Health Committee meetings, at which the NHS Clinical Commissioning Group do attend. I'm pretty sure, well, I know for a fact that they are aware of this Section 106, but they don't seem to want to enter into dialogue with Braintree District regarding the funds. And there is funding there, but we can't, as a district council, run around and say, oh, we have some money, would you like it? We need the NHS to open dialogue. But so that's what I'm saying is perhaps one part of the process, Chairman, is how do we do that?
Chairman, if I may just assist Councillor Rose. A part of the scrutiny review is to examine how, not only how we hold the money, but why we hold this money. And as you'll see from the terms of reference that we've set out in the report prepared by Jess, is that one of the key contacts and resources is to ask officers of the NHS to come forward to be part of the evidence gathering, so you can put those questions to the NHS as to why they are not seeking to secure the money that's been held in the council's accounts through 106 is to then deliver those facilities that the public are asking you as ward members to deliver. Now, can I just pick up the point that you've said about conversations probably at full council? Can I remind you, it's the function of this committee to review the 106 provisions. This is what Councillor Radley has asked through the topic selection, and you're not here to make decisions as to 106 monies, where that goes or how that can be used. You're here to be the critical friend to look at how the authority is using that 106 monies through those terms of reference. So whilst I'm sure you can provide anecdotal evidence as to how frustrations may be within your wards, and if you sit on parishes, the frustrations that you hear,
it's not for this committee to say how it can be dealt with. It's to look at what we're currently doing, what is wrong with what we're doing. Is there any recommendations that can be put to the Cabinet? Because at the end of the day, your scrutiny review is a scrutiny review to the Cabinet where you make recommendations, and it, through your evidence gathering, is where you feel that there could be improvements or acknowledgements or suggestions, and then it's for the Cabinet then to respond. So if you do have any links within the communities about how we can access people for your evidence gathering, then we would be grateful to get those contacts, because we can't. This is not a desktop exercise. This is an active review, and it's not something that we can just do on the papers that the authority has, because as Councillor Radley's already pointed out to you as members, we do have the infrastructure funding statements that shows how we've got the money. The question is, why are we holding on such valuable community assets in the form of £6 million in the council's coffers, and why is it not being used?
Can I just quickly come back on that one, Chair? Yes, yes, Emma, you're quite right. I did say initially when I began to speak that I wasn't going to use this committee to bring it to full council for full council debate. That wasn't the idea of bringing it forward. But Mick is quite right, the Chairman's quite right, is that there probably is process there we need to look at. We can scrutinise that and see how we can fine-tune it and bring it forward so it does help rather than sit on it for 4 years and see what we're doing with it. So it'd be good to have that opportunity, Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, and I think the approach on NHS perhaps might be different to the approach on open spaces, because we're dealing with an outside body as opposed to our own in-house body, if you like. So the approach could well be completely different on each of those tacks. But we can discuss this. Yeah, Councillor Unworth.
Yeah, I think following on from what Emma was saying, I think one of the things that I've certainly experienced with 106 money is twofold. Is the restrictions in where they're written into the contracts, and therefore the constraints as to how you can use them. So I would like to see if there's any way we can look at that, especially since some of them were written some time ago, and they might not necessarily be relevant. Can the interpretation be elaborated on a little bit more? And that is particularly, again, it's experience in my ward that is something that is particularly on the open spaces side of things, where they are specifically aimed at one thing and they could be a little bit more unfocused, I think might be the way to put it. Thank you.
Certainly, I agree. My experience is very similar. I believe the regulations have changed over time, and therefore the agreements have changed with them, and so we do have a myriad of different types of agreement in process. And yeah. So anybody else? Yes,
Yeah.
Councillor
Sorry, somebody else.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to echo what Councillor Unsworth has said, because we've experienced that in our ward certainly as well. By the time the money is actually paid out to when we made the initial applications, things change. So it's quite focused. So yeah, I'd like to look at that within our review. But one of the other questions I have as well, I know the process has changed over the years. One of the criticisms I've been receiving is many years ago, I don't know if this is actually factually correct, so this is something I would like to be checked out, is if years ago Section 106 money was allocated to the parish, so basically they were given the pot of money and said, right, off you go, do what you like. That changed considerably, and maybe quite rightly so, to the whole application process that we have now. But I'd like to look, was that changed, was that a thing, and why was it changed? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good points. Yes, Councillor Everard, I think you were...
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Chairman. Yeah, how many of these things held up by third parties or the recipients or whatever?
I think that's a question, and that's one of the things perhaps the scrutiny would need to aim at. So I think we need just to take note of that when we move forward. That's what are the things that's holding this up, and yeah. So I think that's part of what we look at, or part of what it is looked at. Yeah. Yes.
Can I just follow that? And do we as a council chase these things up and just see if we can keep them live?
Well, I think that's a question that can be put to the officers as part of the evidence gathering. I think what I'd just caution is that officers have come to a number of scrutiny committees over the years to give background information on Section 106 agreements, how they're constructed, the limitations and what they can be for. So to save the time of the committee, what Jess and I will do is to see if we can find the background information to 106s, because obviously, Chairman, although we've not touched upon it, in Appendix 2 of the report is the timetable for the scrutiny review. And so you've only got a set number of reviews. So if we can use the time where you come together to committee in a valuable way and to sort of focus on particular points. So if we can find the background information around Section 106, I think the question which Councillor Dervish has asked about, a change in allocation of 106 money direct to the parish, I think that's a question that we can possibly research and provide you with. So when you do get the officers before you, you can then focus on the process and things like that. So whilst it's would be scrutinised, we can do the scrutiny in a number of ways, but what we want to be able to do is make the best use of that time when you all come together and have got a live witness before you. So some of the traditional and standard questions that we've experienced, if we try and consolidate those together and then give that to members and then help that to level up your knowledge on 106s going forward as best use of your time. But I think if members look at the terms of reference, that the amended terms of reference which Jessica did circulate to the committee, you've got quite a lot of flexibility within those terms of reference to explore some of the concerns that you've raised in the committee, but we may have to do some of that exploration through doing some research and bring that to members as the officers supporting the scrutiny reviews.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions? Councillor Caudle. We'll move along the table.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the work you did on this. I know...
Sorry, Councillor Caudle, can you use your microphone for me, please? Thank you.
Sorry, I was relying on my lungs. I know things take a long time, but the 4 parishes within my ward are mainly infuriated by the whole nature of Section 106, and they believe that even though it is a constitutional issue and requires constitutional change, that it is being looked at, and that it may perhaps in due course allow developers money to be spent on village halls or other things, because the open spaces things, to some extent, there's only so much money you can spend on swings and roundabouts. And it seems to me that the rage, for instance, which seems fairly justified in Earl's Court about their Section 106 money being spent in Hulstead, and the sort of bamboozlement in my other 3 parish council wards about understanding Section 106. I mean, even the fact that it's called S106 leads people to sort of be confused before they even start, because they think it's some secret code. So I think if it's within our remit, we should look at making things clearer and explaining the timing, because initially when I read your report, I thought, I'm sure there are reasons why, and I know procedures have to be gone through, but it does seem surprising that so much time elapses before money is spent. Who's ever, whether it be the NHS, and I know the NHS is incredibly hard to interact with, but so I think this is a really important issue. It is one of the things that comes up a lot in the parish council meetings I have to attend, and it is regarded as incredibly complicated. And I'm very lucky to have Councillor Spray as my boss, really, in the ward, who knows all about planning and about everything else and can explain it, but it doesn't the parish council's personnel change, and new people come along and they need the whole thing re-explaining. So I think if we can, we should, as well as understanding how the whole thing works and everything else, we should try and work out how we can make it clearer and easier for people to understand, basically.
Chairman, just to pick up a point, that may be a recommendation that you come to make as part of your evidence gathering, because whilst at the moment you're identifying some of the concerns around the use of 106 and the perception around 106, ultimately you're going to be making recommendations to Cabinet, and those things can be small scale things like making the process more transparent, improving the information that we give out more understandable, because like you say, Section 106 is a legal provision under the Town and Country Planning Act, which itself is a very complex piece of planning legislation, and then there's all supplementary regulations around that. So it is a very complex area. So it may be that through examining how we do the monitoring, how we use the money, and how we communicate the use of that money, maybe something that you will think actually we need to be a lot more clear to our communities, and that can be a simple recommendation. But what we always say with all scrutiny reviews, your recommendations should be evidence-based, because like anything, if you put a set of recommendations to anybody, first of all they're going to ask you is why these are required. So whilst we'd like to say pull a wish list together, your wish list is more likely to be listened to and acted upon if there's evidence to back the need for it to be there. But certainly within the terms of reference, we have identified that we have planning and Section 106 monitoring officers come forward so they can talk about the existing processes around the 106 monitoring. We've also identified Councillor Mrs Spray to come forward as the Cabinet member for planning. Cabinet members have been very keen to be participating in the scrutiny reviews. Now, they come before you as a witness. They don't come before you, as an addition to your membership. They're here for you to put questions to. So we have identified that Mrs Spray will be invited to come forward. And we've also identified the NHS Property Services officers to be invited to come along as well. Chairman, we would welcome any other witnesses to be identified to us to help you, to look at this scrutiny review. But what I would ask is that if you are thinking of asking for a witness to come forward, please can you have regards to your terms of reference? What is the purpose of bringing them forward? What is the information you want them to give to you? What are your questions that you'd like to pose to them? Because you're only going to get out the witnesses in your, the information you want through your preparation. So later on, Jess and I will make a plea through the chairman that if you, as you identify witnesses, as well as giving us a name, we would like to know what it is you'd like to explore with that witness, having regards to your terms of reference, to make sure that we have a successful and effective scrutiny review.
Chairman, can I make one other point?
Indeed, yes.
It just, because of the timing thing, I just think this is such a wasted opportunity for us to get brownie points, if you see what I mean. Because this should be a bonanza, a gift. And because of the timing, we're not getting the credit for extracting this dosh from the developers and spending it on the community. People are exasperated and they say, oh, well, it's finally come, rather than, wow, we've got 50 grand to spend on this, that, and the other. So I think we should note, I don't know what we can do about it, that this could boost the image of the council, justifiably so, but because of the timing and the misunderstanding, actually sometimes it does us harm.
Yes, there have been many times when when planning applications have been approved, they look at Section 106 as some type of mitigation, if you like, to to that approval. And I think the frustration they're seeing is they're not seeing, though, that mitigation being delivered. No. And I guess this is some evidence that supports that issue. And, you know, the topic is about open spaces and NHS expenditure. It's not about how do you create the money. The money's been created through agreements and planning application. It is, and BDC have got it. The issue is how do we actually get it delivered, and I think to support that and mitigate those developments. Councillor Sphere. Councillor Sphere.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, apologies for being late. I got stuck behind a broken down HGV and was waiting for a tow truck. Secondly, I obviously missed the agenda beginning with declarations of interest. Can I just double check, especially with Emma, that as a member of the planning committee, that this won't impact or impinge my comments on any planning applications whatsoever, because I have been quite vocal quite recently on several section 106 and have made this well known to not only officers but the cabinet lead on planning as well. So I'd just like to seek those reassurances that I can participate fully and contribute.
Absolutely, Councillor Swear. So in terms of declaration of interest, because you are looking at the 106 as a subject, you're not looking at a specific 106, then you're, for example, and what I'd say is that as part of this scrutiny review, as a member of the planning committee and any other member who sat on the planning committee have experience of 106, your contributions to the conversations and sort of shaping the questions to witness is invaluable, because you've obviously had you've looked at the 106 agreements in terms of mitigation and development, and now this is effectively looking at the delivery through the 106. So please bring your experience along. Obviously, any application that's before you as a member of the planning committee, we would advise that you don't discuss that here, because obviously that then could fetter your participation in the planning committee going forward. But as a scrutiny member, your experience as being a member of the planning committee, as any other members, is important to understand how this works. But certainly for tonight's meeting, there's no issue for you. But as we move through the scrutiny review, we will advise you if there's anything that does come up, and that's the same for any members who are involved through 106s through their parishes, councils, or as district councils as well.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, Councillor Sphere, do you have any more questions? No, that was, I think Councillor Everard was next, and then Councillor Arnold, did you want to come back? Yeah, Councillor Everard.
Yeah, there is a lead time from when the developers get up to a certain point and then they meet the criteria. How do we monitor that? Do they let us know? Or this is a question I'd like to be asked.
I'll take the opportunity to answer. I believe that we do have a Section 106 monitoring officer whose job it is to do just that. And my experience is she does a very good job at securing those funds. Okay. So I think a few other nods around. So good. Okay.
I'm still waiting for some.
Yeah.
Thanks. I think, having listened to this discussion, that there's a couple of sort of high-level questions that come out following on from what I said before about restrictions, and they are sort of under what circumstances could the definition be changed? What are the implications of it? What happens if a project's finished? So that would sort of push me towards asking somebody of legal if they can be one of the witnesses. And under what circumstances can extensions be granted to 106 monies? Because I'm presuming other members have seen it as well, where we've lost money because we haven't been able to get it in time. Coggeshall is about to lose some if we don't spend it, so we're rushing around trying to spend some money on allotments before we lose it, although it's not a lot of money. So those are two sort of quite high-level questions that I think really would enable people to understand and see how we could unblock the 106 system a little bit. And I think, picking up on what Councillor Courtauld was saying, some sort of explanation leaflet might be a recommendation that sort of shows the clerks, etc., how the process works could be quite good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. I think there's some very good points that have added to that, particularly the legal point. I agree with you. Yes, Councillor Rowe.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I don't know if you'll discuss this later in the debate, but I'm not totally clear of when, like, we are looking at healthcare provision, where does the 106 money get allocated into that money that we're holding? Does it go into a big fund, or does it, when the 106 is taken from a developer, is it specifically for this project for the NHS or this part for the open spaces? Don't know how it's allocated to which part.
There are legal agreements. The process is that there is a request for funds from the NHS, and if that is agreed by planning, that forms part of a legal agreement for which upon meeting the criteria, the developer has to pay that money to BDC. The NHS then have to request those funds and justify the use of those funds that is in line with the criteria. That's my understanding of the process. I'm having some nods, which is good. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, that is a point that, we have identified the monitors to come forward and plan. Although you've made reference to a legal officer, actually Neil Jones is our lead 106 officer, so he's the gentleman that we would ask to come forward again to the Scrutiny Committee. But they are questions that you to put to those officers. But certainly, my understanding, as outlined by Councillor Radley, is correct. It really does come down to the detail on the 106 agreements as to the triggers and what that can be used for. There's quite a lot of information on 106s because they're documents in the public domain. So if members want to look at 106s, what I just caution you with is you're not there to examine whether that 106 is right or wrong, but to give you an understanding of what a 106 can look like and what it can do. So just to remind you here, you're not here to scrutinise any particular 106, but it might just give you an understanding, particularly if you look at some more of the historic ones and some of the modern ones, just how they've changed in detail. Because it is an agreement between two parties. It's the developer and the council as the local planning authority. So, it's not all one way, that it is an agreement by way of agreement.
Councillor Everard, yes.
The criteria that the developers have to reach, is that consistent on every one, like 3 houses?
I would recommend that's a question you put forward to the officers. As I said, I'm not here as evidence. This is something you need to explore through the scrutiny review by having the planning and monitor. But what I can say to you from my knowledge of 106, each one is bespoke to the development that's being proposed. There is a standard framework, but they are bespoke because we can only ask for contributions which are to deal with the impact of the development that's proposed in the area. But I would suggest the 106s are available through the planning portal on various plan applications. You might wish to just have a look at those just to get an idea of what a 106 agreement looks like.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Yes, Councillor Longworth.
Sorry, one final thing, and picking up on that, actually I think that's quite a really important point, is that perhaps we could look at helping the parishes with better wording in their open spaces action plans to make things more available.
Chairman, that would actually fall outside the scope of this scrutiny review.
Thank you.
Although you probably touch upon it, what this is, as the topic proposed by Councillor Radley, it's looking at how the district council, yes, quite often when we're working with scrutiny reviews, we do touch upon some fringe topics, but bear in mind this scrutiny review has to be dealt with in this civic year, and because of the elections next year, we've got quite a truncated year to do it in. So I'm sure as a committee you would prefer to be able to focus on the substance of the scrutiny review, but if there's opportunity to look at some of those fringe topic subjects that are connected to 106, if there's time, obviously we won't ignore anything that comes through the evidence gathering, but it's not necessarily an area that could have a full exploration in. But it's is not a complete no.
No, this may be a point when we're going to talk in a moment about the members' reference group. That may be something that could be part of that as well. So, okay. Any more questions? Okay. So, members, following on from the reports we've received this evening, we've been asked to consider the next steps we wish to take in order to commence our scrutiny review, as well as review the timetable of scheduled meetings for the year. I'd like to start by making some opening suggestions on how we could take this scrutiny forward, and then open up to members to consider this and or make any suggestions or modifications. We've already heard that Councillor Gabrielle Spray, the Cabinet Member for Planning and Infrastructure, has decided to set up a members' reference group on this subject, and we should take care to avoid duplication of work, particularly for officers on this subject, but nevertheless take advantage of the opportunity of doing this reference group. Councillor Spray comments to me are that she sees it as very similar to the members' reference group that was set up on enforcement last year, which was very focused and fairly short lead time in terms of coming up with some findings and recommendations and putting those forward, which were subsequently approved as part of the budget. So it's that model that is her thoughts are around that type of process. I've been informed that the terms of reference are very close to completion for the members' reference group, and Councillor Spray would welcome members of this scrutiny committee to be part of the members' reference group. I've already confirmed to Councillor Spray that I would be interested in being part of that group, and I would encourage other members of this scrutiny committee to put their names forward when requested, which will be fairly soon, I understand. Councillor Spray and officers wish to proceed swiftly, and the member reference group with the members reference group, and I believe we should encourage that. So my suggestion on the next steps is threefold. One is this committee welcomes and supports the formation of a member reference group on this topic. Secondly, the member reference group should focus on those aspects of Section 106 expenditure under the control of BDC, such as open spaces and similar developer contributions. And that this committee requests that the member reference group report back its findings and recommendations to this committee for scrutiny upon the completion of their work. Ideally, this should be at our meeting on the 21st of September, but if not then, very soon afterwards. And then my third point would be that this committee should scrutinise the NHS expenditure by requesting their attendance at the Performance Management Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 27th of July to explain their plans for the money on the funds that are being held by BDC. I think that approach takes two different directions on the one on NHS and one on our own, and I think what's come out tonight is probably in addition to that. Perhaps I'm sensing that there will be value in officers feeding back to this committee to answer some of the questions that have been raised tonight, perhaps at the July meeting, looking at our work programme. And I think actually you've already got it in that programme nicely, but I didn't mention it in mine. But I think your comments and questions tonight, and I'm sure Jess has noted all of those, could start to form, shall we say, the opportunity for ask questions and have a better understanding of it, perhaps at the July meeting. I see the members' reference group actually getting into and looking at the processes and the resources that are in place today to deliver Section 106, and that would involve officers and members as a working group, like happened with the enforcement, And I believe that could be quite effective in trying to examine the current process and come up with some findings, with the caveat that they come back to this committee with those findings and recommendations for us to scrutinise. I think if we get into the minutiae of that process as a committee, we will then end up duplicating effort, which is something I'm sure we don't want to do. So that's the kind of basis of my suggestions. I'm happy if any members are not happy with that or got any further suggestions or modifications, then please feel free to say so. Welcome any comments.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree with your comments about the reference group. I think it's absolutely essential that they come back and report to us their findings before we finish this.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Caudle.
To some extent, Chairman, we're being asked to go at the pace of the reference group, aren't we? I mean, because they're looking at areas that perhaps we might have looked at if they didn't exist, if you see what I mean. I mean, we've been perhaps perfectly reasonably confined to the NHS and open spaces, but, you know, the Section 106 covers a lot more than that, as your report points out. And I do think, of course, we must wait for them to finish what they're doing, it's very much necessary that they report back to us. But when we're thinking about the points that Councillor Unsworth raised about making things clearer for people, or coming up with a brochure or a web page or whatever, an explanation, we don't need to wait for them, do we, to do that? I mean, can't we think about how, I mean, maybe we should talk to someone within marketing, in an officer to do with marketing, so that when Earlscombe Parish Council start jumping up and down on their desks, we can say, can we refer you to? Because I do think it would be, you know, it would be jolly useful.
Chairman, the only thing I'd say is, again, as I said again, it's not for you to fix the problem, it's for you to make recommendations. So if through your gathering of evidence one of the things is that there's a misunderstanding because there's a lack of documentation that clearly explains the process, then that is the recommendation that you can make to the Cabinet. I wouldn't see a benefit in getting a comms officer come here to say how to produce a document because they're not producing it on your behalf. But if you feel that actually one of the frustrations around the 106 process is because there's a lack of a guidance document that is written in a style that can be understood by a non-planner, non-lawyer, non-developer specialist, then that's something you could put forward as a recommendation through your review. As we've said in other scrutiny reviews, your recommendations can be a variety of things, and they don't all have to be a hard-hitting, we've got this terribly wrong, this needs a root and branch sort of restructure, etc. It can be those light touch things, because what we have discovered through other scrutiny review is there's a lot of misunderstanding how local government work because the way local government produces information. And the thing that I would say that most ward members have frustrated is people either don't read documents because they're too complex or bulky to work your way through. So if you, through your question of the officers and the other witnesses and your own research, is actually one of our failings is because we don't provide a nice simplified guide, then that is a nice recommendation that you can put forward because you've got the evidence to support that.
Can I recommend that we do that recommendation?
As I said, we like evidence-based recommendations, but certainly when Jess is our principal evidence capture, and if members doing their own sort of research into this scrutiny review, because it is your scrutiny review, we as officers support you, but we don't do the review for you. This is your scrutiny review. If you say, well, actually, we found these examples of 106 guidance as to how money can be spent, almost like a dummy's guide to 106s. We don't have something similar. We think this is something that could help to understand. Then bring that forward as part of your evidence. It may be something that the working group might also be looking at, but if you've come across it as part of your scrutiny review, then please bring it forward, and then that can be part of the evidence that we pull together for the committee and then set out in the report.
Yes, I think looking at the July meeting, then, that could be, if we at that meeting ask Councillor Spray and I don't know if it's Sarah Birder, come along, because I think if they were at this meeting here, I'm sure they'll be at the heart of the member reference group as well. So if the member reference group is in progress, by July it will be, my understanding for sure, for them through Councillor Spray, who will probably be chairing the members reference group, to hear the voice and the views of the Scrutiny Committee and some of the things you raised tonight, that could be an input into that member reference group, so that they can, if you like, some of the good points like the legal issue about changing that could be the opportunity to table that as an input into that member reference group, I would suggest.
I think what we're trying to do is shortcut it here. I think we all know it's a problem, and I think it would, I would thoroughly support it if we could do it quite quickly, irrespective. I appreciate Emma's comments, but I think we all know the value of it. Just to let you know, I have put forward my name for the members' reference group through our group leader as well, something I'm quite interested in and have been for a while. Thank you.
Good. That's good news. Okay. Any further comments or questions? Okay. So, on that basis then, thank you, members. If there are no more suggestions, we'll move on to the recommendations. And in the agenda, we are asked to formally approve three recommendations. One is to agree the terms of reference of the scrutiny review. And number two, note the anticipated work programme of the committee. And three, consider steps we wish to take in order to commence the scrutiny review. On the first two items, I think, unless members have any changes or they would like to make or suggest there, on those first two items, I think perhaps they would be as read. And on the item three, I would suggest, if members are happy with the 3 points that I raised, as being point number three, or any modification of those, then I would suggest we move forward with that. Is there any comments on any other alternative suggestions? No? Okay. In which case, is there a member that wishes to move these recommendations?
Happy to move it.
Councillor Spear, and would like to second? You like to second? Councillor Unwin, would you like to second those? So, all those in favour? I think that's unanimous. Thank you, members. Okay. So, members, the recommendations have been moved and seconded. Oh, no, we've done the bit. So, the recommendations are approved. I will now proceed to item 6, which is the decision planner. Members, for this item, we've been asked to review the decision planner for the period 1st of June to the 31st of August 2022. Do members have any issues that they would like to raise in respect of the decision planner? No? No, there are. So thank you, members. If members have no more observations, we will be asked to note the decision planner for the period 1st of June, 31st of August 2022. Can I take it the decision planner is noted? I will take silence as assent. I have silence. Thank you, members. The decision planner has been noted, and we will now proceed to item 7, urgent business. Members, as there is no urgent business, this item concludes our business for this evening. I will therefore close the meeting of this meeting of the Performance Management Scrutiny Committee at 20:09. Members, for your attendance this evening and for those watching the broadcast via the Council's YouTube channel.